Right, welcome back to News Sources. We're glad that you've joined us. Before the break, we asked, should the MPs and governors who have defected from court be subjected to a by-election? Should the MPs and governors who have defected from court be subjected to a by-election? And just to sample some of your views, MCA Gatetuan Duati says, no, it is very expensive and only a few months remaining before the general election. Let them remain. So far on our Twitter poll, 60% are saying yes, 40% are saying no. We'll sample some more views as we go through the show. But now moving on, Kenya has now accused Somalia of ignoring a pact to resolve a boundary row. Somalia has sued Kenya at the International Court of Justice, seeking fresh demarcation of our common maritime boundaries.
All that Kenya asserts is that the agreements must be performed in good faith. Somalia cannot repudiate its obligations and then portray itself as a victim of Kenya.
Kenya gave no indication that it regarded the MOU as imposing any obligations in regard to settlement of the boundary dispute.
So we're arguing over boundaries, maritime boundaries, about 100,000 kilometers, I think, of a shared boundary. And there's potential for gas and oil exploration around that area. So it's kind of like an economic battle. But Gideon Mugai there going straight for the jugular again and trying to disqualify them from the get-go, saying we agreed how we would handle this conflict. And so why are we being sued? How do you see this unfolding, Jambi?
I don't know. For some reason, I feel like somehow we're being pitted against each other, Somalia and Kenya, by external forces. Right now, we've already given licenses to Italy and the US, and I think France, if I'm not wrong. We are fighting for resources. Before the resources were found, we were totally okay since 1924. And in 1979, we declared our exclusive economic zone. Nothing. And then in 2009, we agreed. We had an MOU saying we will do the dividing essentially via negotiations through the UN Commission. But now Somalia has decided, you know what? I'm going straight to the ICJ. I want this revisited. So currently what I feel we're facing is we're being pitted against each other in a conversation that can be had country to country.
How are we being pitted against each other?
Because from where I stand, Somalia has seen the potential of this triangle, so to speak. And I have to say, off the record,
or on the record,
or on the record, is that we have foreign investors, people who've realized, hey, we already have 2 oil blocks in that little triangle. Mm-hmm. So how about you guys just get that part of yours, and then we can drill through that, you know?
Right, Betty, what do you think?
Okay, I'm agreeing with Jambi that the sense I'm getting is we are being pitted against each other, but it is not necessarily this country. It's not as some. It's, how do I put it? The interests that you're protecting. Like for instance, in Kenya's case, we are protecting. You said Italians and the sort of people who we have given contracts to. Mm-hmm. We are holding on to their interests and standing on that in that regard. But Somalia probably went to their rivals. Mm-hmm. And that's what's causing this fracas. So it is in Somalia's interest to revise the situation. Maybe they have contracts with entirely different organizations, and they just want a bigger piece of the pie. In my view, it's odd for it to just
So is it perhaps a proxy kind of war that is being fought by investors on either side, in Somalia and in Kenya?
It could be, yes, it could be. I actually agree with Betty and Jambi that there could be external forces, championing this whole thing. But again, what strikes me and actually makes me, raise an eyebrow is the fact that we actually had an agreement with Somalia, and Professor Gideon Mugai argues that this agreement was that we have this issue settled out of court, mm-hmm. that we just have negotiations but not necessarily going to court. Yeah. So I feel like Somalia feels that either they have been shortchanged or they have pressure from external forces. Investors and all these people were saying, we need a portion of this. But it's a very difficult decision the ICJ will make, because how do you draw a line on a patch of, water?
Yes, it's
very
actually going to be
difficult.
quite technical for
Yeah.
them, but sticking to matters, Somalia, the Jubilee government has now laid the blame for Somalia's ban on Kenyan Miraa at Peter Munya's feet. But the Meru governor has defended himself, saying, and I quote, "Belated repetition of lies does not turn them into truths. Miraa flights were temporarily stopped to secure the IGAD meeting, and they were resumed immediately thereafter. That is the truth. The rest is propaganda."
Hiyo ilikuwa siasa porojo, na tunasema siasa ya porojo ili ya mambo ambao yanadhuru maisha ya wananchi wa Kenya. Uachane na siasa kama hiyo.
Betty, I'm coming straight to you. Straight to you with this one, because you're like, he went to Somaliland as who? Remember the last time?
Yes.
So now he's basically saying, this had nothing to do with me. This is the Jubilee government trying to espouse some sort of propaganda about what happened to the detriment of the Meru people. So
No, listen, you know what he did, yeah? He went there and he made a promise that Hargeisa government, or sorry, Somaliland government would be recognized by our national government. That in itself was a trigger. The rest, yes, I kind of agree with him. It was him being pinched and pushed around. But, you know, what were you doing there?
but a trigger for what? Because he's basically saying
No,
the flights were banned for the duration of the IGAD meeting, and then they were resumed.
But
So
if he went to Somalia really and made such promises, it's very unfortunate because he has absolutely no diplomatic right, you know, to make any of such promise. So whether he did,
he did
he's
say
now
that
saying he did.
Miraa from Ethiopia is sold in Somaliland, and the Ethiopian government has never been accused of making any recognizing Somaliland or not. The issue of Somaliland has never come up with with other Miraa traders. So he's wondering why it's coming up in his case.
Because he went there and brought it up. You know, that's the
Yes.
thing. He went there and brought it up. I can understand him going there and trying to secure deals on behalf of the Meru people.
Yeah.
But what he did is he went there and tried to act like he's the president of Kenya. And by the way, if you observe his politics, he's been quite abrasive towards the presidency himself, the president himself, and the deputy president. So of course there's that political angle. And like I told you, if I was Amina Mohammed, I'd let him stew, which she did, and I'm so proud of her. So, so yes, he has to, he has to face the consequences. In as much as some of it was propaganda, he set the ball rolling.
Yes, but he's alleging that there was no ban, that the flights were temporarily stopped because of the IGAD meeting. So how do you reconcile that with him going to Somaliland and promising them or recognizing their sovereignty, and then that causing a ban if there was no ban?
He can allege until the cows come home. What he did by virtue of going to Somaliland, which is still a disputed piece of land or rather area in Somalia, and made promises that essentially the foreign affairs secretary should be able to do, considering the foreign relations, and pull that one off. State House can claim anything, and Munya will not have a leg to stand on. What he did was he threw everything foreign relations to the back and just went. I admire what he did. He was doing it for the Meru people, but it was done in the wrong.
He didn't observe protocol.
He did, and it took the president's
intervention.
Intervention to just get that ban lifted. Because after the meeting that the president had with the diplomats and the leaders from Somalia, that is when we had now that the ban has been lifted. And we were looking at maybe the political leaders saying, or politicians, just playing it as pure politics, especially for Peter Munya. It's very unfortunate because he's been bashed, left, right, center for all manner of things.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And on another note, are we all, in many countries around the world, Miraa is actually considered a drug. And yet we trade it, we've kind of accepted it like legal marijuana in the States, like it's part of almost the Kenyan psyche. Should we be thinking about perhaps moving on from Miraa crops to anything else, string beans?
That will take time. That will take time, for first to convince the people of Meru that you need to move on and move to something else. This is part of their livelihood. They make money out of it. They take their children to school because of Miraa. Yeah, so it will take a lot of time to convince these people that you need to move on from Miraa to, maybe rice or wheat or some other.
I'm sorry, I think we're missing out on a very big opportunity. The illegalization or the hate towards Miraa, which is, what do you call this? A stimulant. Just like coffee, just like tea. But over the years, it's been given a bad rep. Okay, now instead of, you see what Uhuru did, he actually approved it to be a cash crop, which essentially creates an opportunity in the market. It's not something we need to do away with. It's just been given a bad rep, and yet we have stimulants just like coffee and tea, which are praised and sold really, really high up there.
Because they've come to be accepted.
Yes, they've come to be, and they're still stimulants.
Yeah,
That's true.
Well, good points there, but moving on. The National Environment Tribunal has temporarily stopped construction of the Nairobi-Naivasha section of the standard gauge railway that was to pass through the Nairobi National Park. The orders were issued after activist Okiya Omtata and Kenya Coalition for Wildlife Conservation filed an appeal against the continuation of the railway project through the park.
Part of the process of the environmental impact assessment will be a number of public fora where everybody will be able to express their views.
He says that we are going to negotiate or talk to the Kenya Railways. But what we are telling him is the community, the Maasai community, gave up that land for conservation. And they are the custodian of this park.
This is a very emotive issue. Whether or not you're an animal lover or not, this park has been there for the longest time, one of the only parks that exists within a capital city. And the Mombasa Naivasha or Nairobi Naivasha section of this SGR project was never envisioned in the beginning. It just came up recently. So are we being unreasonable, or the conservationists being unreasonable to demand that it should not pass through our park?
Well, the ecosystems that are involved in a national park like Nairobi National Park are highly sensitive, and the biodiversity of this particular system is already suffering. You can see that the other day there was a cheetah found in Utawala, yes, and also you have the cases of the hyenas, cases of the lions, and so that tells you that something's going wrong. Having said that, the sort of arguments that the government is giving in terms of costing something you need to consider. And in totality, I do believe that the biodiversity, if we had more involved consideration of the park and taking into consideration all stakeholders and a more executable plan, the park can recover its numbers. But my question is, where's the commitment to that? I have not seen that. I've not seen the argument is very hardline. That's what I'm trying to say. That stop it, and you have to find other land elsewhere. The cost alone, if I knew, by the way, let me say this for free, if I knew that this railway is going to pass through a certain section, I'll rush there and buy the land and then sell it to the government at exorbitant rates.
But you see, now this is the national park.
So
So how do we go around that?
Yeah. So there has to be a comprehensive plan. I don't see that.
My problem with this is that this particular stretch was not part of the initial plan, and nobody knows why it's there.
And actually, it's very interesting because NEMA, it now appears they did not do a feasibility study.
Of all things.
Yes, so it's very worrying because they knew that the SGR project and the rail was going to pass through that place, that region of Langata, and specifically the national park. Then it's their responsibility to do a feasibility study. And then again, the second issue for me is the fact that I don't think there was any sort of public involvement. Nobody talks to the public about the fact that there's a railway crossing this area, and so it just came as a shocker. But I think this is a very huge project, and it shouldn't have quotas like, flat-footed. We were not prepared for it.
And I was shocked there was no feasibility study. I mean, the phase 1 is done. Phase 1 has taken a while. Still, no feasibility study has been done. It's like they were convinced, it's like we're going to get a license. We'll get there. You'll just give you the license at the end of it all, and we'll be good. But then they're saying that they will try their best to, first off, the original map. You remember the map changed? The original map was cutting at the edges of the park.
Yes.
But right now, it's really hiving a huge part of the park. How did they come to that? Did they involve the public? And then when it comes to raising it, we're raising it so that it doesn't interfere with the animals. But what about emissions? Who's talking about them? How will it affect the park? Again, we're feeling like this is just, and with a country that has a record of land grabbing at a very high rate, we just feel like we're being shortchanged. First, we understand we need to have an SGR, but we feel like it's not transparent enough.
Surely, I think that the government should have done more. I mean, this is a project that is handled by very many stakeholders in government, apart from the Ministry of Transport, there's NEMA, the center. They should have done more than they did. They failed on their part.
Yes, they should have been more due diligence,
Yes.
at least a feasibility study. But moving on, coast-based journalists this morning took to the streets to protest harassment and a hostile working environment. Beg your pardon. They presented their petition to Coast Regional Coordinator Nelson Miraa. The demonstration in Mombasa also comes in the wake of the unresolved, mysterious death of Standard Group reporter Joseph Masha, who collapsed and died at his Kilifi home. So in this new constitutional dispensation, we have so many freedoms: freedom of expression, of association, of information. Are we again saying that journalists' lives are under threat? Is this really possible after all freedom fighters, let's call them that, have fought for all this time, for this democratic space that we have?
Yes. The main thing that we journalists feel right now is we're not secure. We're not covered, essentially. We're not protected. Because I remember back a time, and even in the Western world, whereby we're in a riot and the press is able to actually move through the scene without so much as even being injured. Just the other day in, is it Makuyu, where they were fighting, there was land tussle back and forth between students and some company. And journalists were actually injured. Right now, you're afraid of even digging deep because you're afraid that some big guy somewhere could send people for you. So right now, we're not feeling protected. We're not feeling like even the people who we work for protect us enough. So our lives are in danger as is.
But then what more could they do? Because when they spoke to Nelson Miraa, he told them, well, I'll ask the government to do what they can as fast as they can, but he didn't actually say what that was.
You have a situation where, I hinged this on the devolution process. You have a situation where instead of us having, let's say, 390 MPs to worry about and focus on, we now have so many MCAs, we have so many governors, and that sort of mini kingdoms creates room for excessive personalities that do not like you digging into their practices, especially when it comes to corruption at the county level, which we have seen is rampant. Was it Kisii? MCAs buying.
Okay, Betty, I think I'm just going to hurry up a bit and allow Faith some time to say something.
I mean, it's a very sad story. Being a journalist, it just frightens you. It scares you off. The fact that in this time and age, you cannot even go deeper into the investigative stories and just inform the public. And I wish the government can do more, because there's been a lot of tussle, a lot of laws that are coming up that are trying to muscle the media in this government. I hope the government can do more to protect journalists.
And I have to add, just the other day we were protesting about Willie, the lawyer.
Yes.
Okay, and this just shows that it's not just journalists whose lives are in danger.
It's actually Kenyans.
It's Kenyans as a whole.
Well,
So,
ladies, I'm going to have to stop you there. Unfortunately, it's been a good show. Thank you so much, Jambi Mungai, Betty Waitherero, Faith Rono, thanks for joining us. Before we asked you, should the MPs and governors who have defected from court be subjected to a by-election? And the results are in, people. 58% of you say yes, and 42% of you say no. So there you have it. Thank you so much for joining us on News Sources tonight. We'll be back next Wednesday as usual. Kindly join us again. My name is Julie Masika.